We could start with actual introductions. I'll go ahead. So my name is Lara Ho. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I work for the International Rescue Committee, and I'm one of the co-chairs for the Health and Nutrition Workgroup. And I'll hand it over to Stephanie.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Stephanie Vasquez. Work for Bixel, Communications and Technology, small business. And I'm also a co-chair of the Health and Nutrition Working Group with SID-W.
I forgot to add, I was going to say each person maybe if you could tell us how you got involved in SID or how you heard about this. And I can say that it was one of my business development colleagues who actually works on USG partnerships was the one who connected me to SID and encouraged me to get involved in the work group.
I can follow, Laura. Yeah, so I'm, I guess, a year into my co-chair position here. And again, yeah, similar to Laura, a colleague had mentioned that they were, looking for new co-chairs and, recognizing that I had a health background, if this would be something of interest. And so I got connected to SID-W and now have the opportunity to serve as a co-chair for this work group.
Paul, do you and the SID staff want to go ahead before you introduce yourselves?
Maybe we should let everybody else introduce themselves first, and then we can go at the end.
Okay, sounds good. I'll just go down, if we can just go down the list then. Alexandria? People can just go ahead and introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Alexandria Schmal, and I'm the nutrition lead with Sanitation, a DC-based international NGO that focuses on improving agriculture and livelihoods through market systems and agricultural development initiatives. And this is my first meeting with the working group today.
Thanks, welcome. Allison?
Hi, my name is Allison Clausing, and I am the Program and Data Nutrition Specialist at Opportunity International. I am located actually in Chicago. This is my first meeting, and a colleague that is located in DC working with USG partnerships let me know about this. So I'm really excited.
Okay, thanks. Andrea?
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea Edmond. I also work at the International Rescue Committee with Lara, and I am the Advocacy and Communications Specialist for the IWOG Newborn Initiative. This is my first meeting as well. Lara passed it along, and I was really interested in hearing more about the youth advocacy event and the planning around that. So excited to meet everyone.
Thanks. Matthew?
Hello, my name is Matthew Zink. I am with CRDF Global, and I support our global health business development efforts. And our organization recently joined SID in the past year, and so I'm kind of our global health representative for SID. So this is my first meeting, so very excited to be here.
Thanks. And Yanin Geda?
Yeah, hi. My name is Yaningida Kasahum, but I go by Abby, so to make it easy for you. I'm actually a DRPH candidate at London School of Hygiene, Tropical Medicine. I just recently moved into the Washington, D.C. area. So currently I'm just affiliated with the National Academy of Science as a peer reviewer on COVID-19 response and with Africa CDC. And yeah, my goal is hopefully to network and see what is happening actually in this area. That's all.
Okay, do we have anyone else who's not staff who hasn't introduced themselves?
I don't believe so.
Okay, that's it. So yeah, Paul, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I'll start for the team and I'll pass it along to everybody else. Paul Sherman, I'm the Director of Programs for SID-W, so I help manage all the programs that we're doing. Obviously the work group being a very big chunk of that. So here to answer any questions as they come up, and I'll pass it over to the rest of my colleagues, starting with Pebbles.
Hi everyone, this is Pebbles, guys. I'm the one behind the SID main account, so unfortunately my name is not up on screen, but I am the Membership and External Affairs Manager with SID, so mainly I'm here today to support you any technical help as needed, but I'm also just really excited to hear the conversation. I'll pass it to Melina.
Hi everyone, my name is Melina Reynoso. I'm with Sid Washington as one of the program associates, and I use she, her pronouns like everyone else on staff here. I'm just here to help support. And again, I'm really excited to see what you all will bring up. I'll go ahead and pass it to Jamal.
Hey everyone, I'm Jamal. I'm the Events Administration Coordinator at SID. And like everyone said, I'm just here to support and listen to the conversation. And I'll pass it to Vivian.
Hi everyone, my name is Vivian. I'm also a program associate with SID. Also here for support and just very intrigued about learning this work group as well. I think that's everyone from SID.
Great, thank you. So I've put off the agenda for today. We've finished the introductions. I'm going to give a brief review of what we've done in the past year, and then we'll start talking a little bit about planning and events for next year. We had a few people fill out the survey, so we can talk a little bit about that. And then there's a final agenda item about the co-chair recruitment, because my term as co-chair will be ending in July. So apologies for those of you who have attended events and already know about these, but I wanted to sort of give you a sense of what the work group does. It's quite open to what we choose to do. We're expected to organize a few events, and they can be in different formats. What we found that has been sort of what people have been interested in the most is different technical topics and sharing, learning, and things like that. So last year, we did an event in collaboration with the education work group that was focused on the nurturing care framework, so early childhood development. And it was a panel session. So I think we had an opening speaker, and then we had 3 panelists, one from USAID, one from IRC, who talked more about the humanitarian setting, sort of, and then someone from PATH who talked about integration of ECD within health programs and more development settings. And the USAID talked a little bit more about the M&E and sort of how we're moving the nurturing care framework ahead. That was supposed to be an in-person event, but because of COVID, ended up being online. So it was our first online event. Subsequently, we've gotten more used to doing the online events. So we did another collaboration. This was with the Environment and Sustainability Work Group. We originally had been interested in talking about climate change, but in the end ended up organizing an event around mitigating poor urban sanitation and health impacts. And since we had this opportunity with doing the event online, it was nice because typically our in-person events are in DC, so we have to get speakers who are already in DC because we don't really have a budget to bring people in. But this was because we knew it was going to be an online event, we were able to plan it and have people from across the world. So with different speakers from a variety of organizations, partners, local organizations to talk about their work. And we had opening speaker from the World Bank who sort of moderated this, who's done some work on sort of developing a lot of frameworks for urban sanitation. And then we had someone from WHO, someone from an NGO, and I think possibly someone from City. I don't remember exactly the last one. It was more or less a traditional panel and sort of discussion. Then we had another joint session that was with the monitoring and evaluation work group. So we decided to focus on how COVID had impacted monitoring evaluation and ways that people had to adjust and sort of best practices used for trying to figure out how to deal with continuing to do monitoring evaluation in light of the pandemic, where there were a lot of constraints of travel and things like that. And so we had an opening speaker from USAID. And then what we did is actually lightning talks, which were much shorter. I think each person had about 2 minutes. And we had a very wide variety of people who did MEL across pretty much all different sectors. So people from health, from governance, from peace building, protection, things like that. And it was nice to have a really broad range of student speakers. Again, we got people from all over the world. They gave very, very quick snippets of, either a lesson learned or an example, a case that they had of how they adapted their M&E. And then the moderator did some Q&A and some discussion with each of them. So that was sort of a nice, different way to present a panel event with the lightning talks. And then This event actually hasn't happened yet. It's our next event. Again, we were approached by the Youth and Development Work Group who wanted to do something on youth advocacy to advance family planning. So this is coming up very soon. We have a great panel of 3 youth activists, a moderator who works with youth advocates from Pathfinder, and a brief opening speaker who will talk a little bit about the needs for family planning for adolescents and youth. And so excited to hear about different youth and their work that they've done, again, across different geographies for family planning. So that's sort of where we are with what we've done and are about to do. And I think I'll hand it over to Stephanie, who's going to talk a little bit about planning for next year.
Great, thanks, Laura. The only thing I just wanted to add, having worked on a few of those events over the last year, one of the benefits of working on these events is working with other work groups. As you can see, I think almost all of our events really were a joint collaboration with other SID Washington work groups. And so as we kind of think sort of forward looking, thinking through sort of the priorities around global health and nutrition, if there's opportunities to integrate with other work groups, that's something we might want to keep in mind. Also, in a COVID environment, I think one of the benefits that it's brought to us, unfortunately, we're all online all the time, but it has given us more accessibility to field representation to be part of our webinars. And so I think that was a nice benefit. In many of the webinars we planned last year was really how can we get people that are in the field to be part of the conversation, so it's not just staff based in the DC area to be part of these discussions. And so also thinking forward as well, how do we want to integrate field-based perspectives? Where it's unclear sort of what's going to happen over the next 6 months to a year, if we'll still remain kind of in this environment. We may not be able to meet in person, so we might want to continue to take advantage of what it offers in terms of bringing in that field-based perspective. And so thinking through sort of what are the priorities we want to think about in terms of events for the next year, I thought we could make this a more collaborative. And so I put a link in the chat. So if you want to just take a click on it, I'm not sure if I can take control, Laura, or if you can click on it. And that will take us to the Jamboard. And it'll just be an opportunity for us just to talk informally in terms of sort of what we think our priorities are in terms of key topics that we would want to bring to this platform. SID-W has such a broad audience that it's such a great opportunity to think through sort of what are areas that we're interested in highlighting that may not be touched in other forums, or there are different perspectives we want to offer. So kind of pulling from the survey, unfortunately our survey, we didn't get a lot of feedback. We got 7 responses from that survey. But in that survey, it's clear people are really interested in networking, really kind of sharing best practices. And so how can we kind of continue in those themes and thinking through sort of what are the topics we want to think about for the next year, and then think through sort of those formats that we could think about, whether it's webinar or maybe some non-traditional formats as well. The Jamboard, if you have any issues with it, it should be pretty easy in terms of being able to click. I think you're controlling this, right, Laura? I will click on mine.
Yeah, you can go. It should show up if you start adding stuff.
Okay.
Right, I'm just sharing my screen.
Okay, perfect. So let me click on the Jamboard. And I thought we could just take a few minutes just to think through sort of, what are some of the key topics we want to consider in the next year. And I'll just open mine.
You might need to change. I'm looking at it says view only, so I'm not sure I can actually add things. I don't know if that's the case for everyone else, that they can only view.
Oh, is
no one share an editable link?
Has anyone else been able to get in? Let me just do a quick test. I can add stuff.
Yeah, it's view only.
It's only view only. Okay, so let me see if I can change it.
It's, I think when you click on the share, you just have to change the setting to editors.
Ah, here we go. Oh, okay, here we go. Editors, okay. Okay. Does it work now? Let me know if you're able to add to it.
That works.
Okay, perfect. So we can just focus on the left side of the Jamboard, sort of thinking through topics of interest. And again, pulling from the survey, we received 2 areas that from the respondents. One was sort of on focusing on market systems to improve nutrition in middle low income countries. And the second was more general in terms of how we can think about issues related to global public health and related to related to project management and business development trends. So maybe if you want to just take a few minutes now that you guys can add stuff, feel free to add or feel free to talk. I can also add things as well. If there's areas that we want to think about in this next year, obviously I think COVID is something that's front and center in many of our work and you know, many of our conversations. But if there's different ways we want to think about COVID in this next year, I think there's opportunities to kind of frame the conversations in a unique way.
And just if you haven't used Jamboard, so if you can see on the screen, you can just click on this sticky note if you're on the panel on the left, and it gives you a sticky note. And if you type, like, if you just type in, I'll just do test and save, it'll put the sticky note there, and then you can move the sticky note around. You can make it bigger or smaller, like this stuff. But yeah, I'll delete that one.
Or feel free if you want to just, yeah, you can say it. I'm happy to type it in as well. You know, if there's ideas that people have in terms of what are some of the events we want to think about, or just topics. It doesn't even have to be events, but just sort of areas that we know maybe aren't traditionally discussed, or things that we want to think about in a different way.
Maybe just kind of building off what you were saying, Stephanie, of COVID being front and center. I know that have seen some kind of calls for new financing mechanisms related to pandemic preparedness and kind of resilience and kind of whatever buzzwords you want to use. But so I don't know if that's something that would fall into the category where others aren't also focusing on it, but I think could be an interesting avenue of how to help influence that conversation if it is of interest.
Yeah, I think there's a lot around COVID, right? Sort of the financing piece, the vaccine piece in particular, and sort of being the Health and Nutrition Workgroup. I mean, it's an opportunity to kind of think through how we want to frame those conversations. I see someone else put in sort of the impact of COVID-19 in the health systems and lower in LMIC countries. Did someone want to expand on that in terms of sort of what kind of angle they might be thinking? This is interesting. The link between COVID-19 and climate change.
Sorry, I think you asked about the COVID comments.
Yeah, if you wanted to expand on your sticky note here and the impact of COVID-19 on health systems.
Yeah, so at least from my understanding and just scanning the environment, it looks like, I guess, COVID had disrupted a lot of the healthcare systems, particularly in low and middle income countries, or particularly low income countries. For example, in the attention that used to be given to maternal and newborn healthcare had been severely curtailed, I think, in a lot of countries. But that also goes for malaria or other tropical conditions. This is just looking at communicable diseases, obviously, but it also has a huge impact on non-communicable diseases in middle-income countries. And I think there are a lot of studies coming out of India, for example, that have shown the devastating impact COVID had on health provision for non-communicable diseases as well. So, I mean, obviously, still right now, we're all trying to figure out exactly how it impacted, but I think that deserves a lot of attention, basically, and how can I say, coming back to post-COVID levels or even improving them better, actually.
Yeah, there's a lot there. And are you currently, it sounds like you're also involved in COVID-19 research?
I am. So my particular involvement right now is actually giving advice to or commenting on recommendations that are provided to CDC Africa, but focusing on specific countries. So right now, one of the initiatives is basically every month, there would be a focus on 3 or 4 countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and how to go about implementing basically non-pharmaceutical interventions for COVID. So which means basically focusing on, how can I say, more on modifying social behavior and some of our public engagement. And then of course the economical or how to better support people basically for the economical fallouts. So these are population-based approaches for most of these countries. Also, I guess it touches a bit on some of these negative impacts on the health system.
Right. No, thank you for sharing that. I'm seeing sort of this little cluster here of COVID-19 related themes, and especially the one related to climate change, because I feel like that also aligns nicely to the Biden administration is also investing more heavily in climate change. So there might be an opportunity here for us to think about, you know, how we might want to look at COVID-19 through a climate change lens. Good, thanks for organizing. I was kind of clustering them as well, so. There's a few here around sort of health systems related. I don't know if anyone kind of speaks to sort of what their thoughts here on strengthening the health system for UHC and global health security.
Yeah, I added that one in, and this is also kind of something that my organization has been trying to think through. And just so for context, CRDF Global, we definitely come in more at the global health security angle. But also, I think, again, kind of with COVID-19 and moving forward, trying to kind of shift the conversation away from these, you know, being two separate things, but rather working, you know, in parallel and kind of having a unified approach rather than just thinking one versus the other.
Right. And there's also this preparing for the next global pandemic. That's an actually interesting extension too, right? So it's not just COVID-19, but what's going to come next could be another topic that we consider.
Yeah, I put that one in there. Normally I don't provide commentary on event ideas for workers, but I felt like, you know, I was just making connections because this is something we're talking about potentially at the annual conference too. Perhaps there might be, I mean, Jamal is the expert on what exactly we're talking about the conference, but I think there's some connections that I can see with some of the topics that are being thrown around, at least for some parts of it, like the table, or roundtable discussions that we're having. So I figured it'd be a nice little connection.
Yeah. And Paul, while I have you, in terms of sort of as we think through sort of the topics of the events and sort of the format of events, I'm assuming we're just going to be virtual at least for the next 6 months.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I'd say virtual through the end of the year at the very least, maybe a little bit longer. We'll see. That's actually a question we're thinking about at higher levels within the organization. So we're trying to figure out what the best move is from a safety standpoint, but also for all of you, obviously, we want to see everybody in person as opposed to being on Zoom calls all the time. So, but sorry, long story short is yes, at least through the end of the year.
Okay, well, that's helpful just in terms of sort of planning this through. And so it seems like there's obviously a great interest around COVID-19, you know, systems related issues, tools and best practices. You know, if there is some interest of work on a COVID-19 panel, you know, we can come together and think through sort of what that panel would look like, thinking through, you know, what do we want to accomplish? What's our objective? Do we want to partner with another working group? You know, if we want to think about climate change, for example, and sort of that intersection, or even the agriculture section. I saw there's someone mentioned about food systems. So there's opportunities for us to kind of take this beyond initial ideas, but how do we want to translate that into actual events that we can program over the next year?
And Stephanie, this is Alexandria. Just to add on the ag and food systems side, there is the UN Food Systems Summit, which is coming up later this year in September. And it's this major event within global food systems and nutrition. And I know that they're hosting a lot of online dialogues in relation to some of the summit themes. So it could be a nice opportunity to, you know, work with some of the other working groups within SID, but then also to capitalize on this, you know, larger global interest in these types of topics. So if there was interest in hosting, you know, as SID and then broadcasting out to a wider group, I'm sure we'd get a lot of interest in that.
And when is that event scheduled?
The summit itself is in September, but the dialogues, which are these online webinars that different civil society groups, governments, NGOs, and other organizations, those are taking place from now until August. And anyone can organize them. So if we were interested in, you know, linking up with the UN Food Systems Summit, we could reach out to them and just say we'd like to co-host an event. But I know that there's a lot of demand for hosting something in partnership with that summit.
Okay.
But we're involved in that at CNFA, so I'm happy to also, you know, make any connections that would be useful.
Yeah, I mean, this is something, I believe there is an agriculture working group, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, food security and agriculture.
Yeah. Okay. So this could be a topic that we might want to think about bringing forward with them. And in terms of kind of, sorry, now COVID-19, I feel like dominates all our conversations, but is there interest? I mean, obviously there's interest around COVID-19. Is there anyone on the call who'd be interested? I mean, the co-chairs are involved in sort of the planning of it, but we also want to rely on our work group members to either help or present at these events. And so once we get a topic a bit more narrow, you know, if there's a particular interest to help with the events, we're more than happy to sort of, you know, invite you to be part of the planning process, or if you'd like to speak at the events, then we can try to think through how we want to frame these conversations as well. Okay. Go ahead. I'm not sure if someone wanted to say something.
Was that a question? Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if people are interested in participating and helping with the planning of these events. You know, we're more than open to work with members in the work group. And then as we think through sort of the events themselves, you know, we also want to draw on the membership as well in terms of presentations in these meetings going forward.
Okay, personally, I'll be interested definitely to help out with the planning. If you want to put me down, I don't know if there was a different way of actually capturing this. But.
Yeah, I mean, what we could do is if COVID-19 is an area of interest, then we could just have like a smaller discussion around how do we want to narrow the theme of COVID-19, because I think there's a lot of different sides to it. I think we just have to be a little bit more targeted in terms of what do we want to achieve and how do you want to make ourselves a differentiator against all the other COVID-19 webinars that we may come across. And what would be the most relevant topics that we would want to highlight in these meetings.
And I guess, Paul, do we have contact information for people so that we can follow up afterwards, or should people drop their emails in the chat?
I can send you the information. I can send you that information, but yeah, and if you feel either way, you can put it in the chat as well.
Okay, thanks.
And I was just going to say, I mean, also generally interested pending when exactly and kind of availability, at least for planning, for speaking at any events. I don't think I would be equipped to do that, but can certainly, pending what the theme is, see if there are any of our technical advisors or other staff that would be relevant.
Okay, yeah, if you could just drop your name in the chat, just to be helpful, to kind of keep that in the notes. So as we kind of think through events, we know sort of who to reach out to. Okay, yeah, so if you're interested in supporting any kind of planning, please feel free to drop an email in the chat, and we can kind of continue the conversation after this webinar. And then in terms of sort of how do we want to structure the format of our events, as Laura mentioned, the majority of our events have been webinars, and it works well, in this environment. We're able to get a large audience, but if there's other ways we want to think about how we bring together in this virtual environment, either using social media, for example, I don't know, virtual happy hours. Someone mentioned happy hours as a way of bringing people together, or other types of format structures we might want to consider that might be a bit more informal. We can also think about that in the next year. And if you have other ideas or other events you've seen that have worked really well in terms of creating that engagement, and sort of it's in a different format rather than just, death by PowerPoint that many of us experience. And so I feel like most people prefer the webinar format. Is there another format that anyone else would want to suggest or recommend outside of the webinar format?
I think the webinar is really helpful, especially if it's a bit stronger on the breakout rooms, like you said, where we all sit through, webinars all day, or give them all day. So I think if it was like light on the whole, like teaching people something, and larger focus on the breakout rooms, I think that would be really helpful.
And I think, sorry, Paul, not to pick on the spot again, but we have that facility, right, through the current platform that we use, that we could do breakout rooms?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, some of the better webinars I've been to have had interactive things like where there's polls or using things like Mentimeter and other tools that engage people to actually participate, which some of it depends on how large the group you have is, but those are things that I found help break up the monotony of people just talking at you.
Yeah, I must say I did like the lightning format that we did where there were no PowerPoints, and all the speakers had 5 minutes of conversation, or 5 minutes to talk about their topic, and then a moderated discussion at the end. And that is engaging, since you weren't necessarily having to sit by and review the PowerPoints, but you could really witness the conversation that was taking place.
Yeah, I think they only had 2 minutes, actually. They were very short, right?
Oh, was it 2 minutes? Okay, yeah.
So we had to get to the point.
Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like webinars continue sort of to be sort of the main method or approach for these events. I don't think we can do happy hours quite yet, unless we want to do like a virtual happy hour, which sometimes can be, I don't know, I've had some good experiences and bad experiences, through some of these formats. Networking, I know people are interested in doing. So again, if anyone has any creative ideas of how best to network, in this virtual environment, it gets a little bit more challenging since we can't do that one-on-one conversation. But if there's approaches you've seen that have been really successful when it comes to networking, definitely we're more than open to considering that as well. So in terms of next steps, then if I'll check the chat, let me see who put their name in there, and we'll continue to follow conversation around COVID-19, if there's interest, also around the agriculture sector as well, and sort of what the intersections would be, and seeing if we can continue sort of those discussions and planning for events in the next year. So I think we have probably two events we might want to think about in this next year. And then just to kind of wrap up, the final thing we wanted to mention is, Laura is stepping down as co-chair, so we do have an opening for the next year. So if you or your colleagues, are interested in being part of this network, it's really an opportunity to really engage with many other businesses, organizations, academia in the health and nutrition space, and to think through sort of what are some of the areas that we want to promote through this platform. So please feel free to step up. You can reach out to me, to Paul, and to other people at SID-W if you're interested in being a co-chair in the next year.
Yeah, and we just wanted to give time if people have questions about the role, since Paul's here and obviously Stephanie and I here, if you have any questions about the role, we're happy to answer them now. Or like you said, or you can message us later. Paul, do you want to maybe say a couple words on the process of how that works?
Yeah, so for the process, it's all on our website. I can post the link in the chat, but it's really just send a resume, cover letter explaining, what your interest in the position, and two references. And then we review the applications, set up calls with those we are interested in, and then we make a decision. So that's the breakdown of how it works generally. But as so we'll try to get through it in as timely a manner as possible. As Laura said, the position will open in probably sometime early summer, before Laura steps down. So hopefully there's a little bit of overlap with Laura, and obviously as well as Stephanie being there as well. So that's generally what we're looking at. So we're hoping to get that underway. But again, as Laura said, if you have any questions about the position, feel free to just let me know or reach out to me. I can put my email in the chat as well.
And it really is, for me, it's been a great opportunity working with the other work groups, and sort of, I've enjoyed getting to know the different people who are chairing the other groups and organizing events around that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And, even if you think about topics after this call, please feel free to reach out. I think we're always open to hearing, ideas or ways that we can position events, around health and nutrition. So please feel free to reach out. If there's things that come up, we're more than happy to work and collaborate on those topics. Great. So I think next step is I see some emails in the chat, so we can start a follow-up chat afterwards and sort of think through these events and thinking through structure and timing, and how we can get moving on these activities in the next year. And hopefully maybe we'll be in person at some point, but it's hard to say at this point.
Are there any final questions from anyone or comments?
How often are these types of meetings?
The business planning meetings? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I believe it's once a year is where.
Oh, this type of meeting only happens once a year?
Yeah.
Okay, so then.
Yeah, we can have more meetings. We've just typically only done one big meeting, but that's
okay.
something that's flexible. Like, we can do as many different activities or events as we want, but at a minimum, we do an annual business planning meeting. Yeah,
so as Laura and Stephanie said, we do one of these per year. This is each work group is required to host 3 events a year, and this is honestly mostly related to SID-W staff capacity, because we're a really small team. We're only a 6-person staff. By just the 3 staff members are on this call, you've met half of the staff. So we're just really small. And there are 15 other work groups, and we have 2 professional networks that essentially act as work groups that are more focused on professional development, scale building, those types of things. So we're just limited in from that standpoint, so we can only do so much. And we want to make sure each work group also other work groups have the opportunity to host their own events too, plus all the member only events that we do. plus the annual events that we do, like the conference. So we're limited in that from that standpoint. Hence why it's only 3. We'd love for our workers to do more, but our heads will just explode. That's just way too much work for us to do more than just, it's just a lot for us to handle. So I just say from that standpoint, just keep that in mind. But that being said, as Laura also said, we can still do more. It will just largely depend on the other work groups and what's going on. So we might not, if say you've already done 2 events, if Health and Nutrition's already done 2 events, we're going to have to wait and see on the other work groups first before we get to a request from the workers. So that's just something we have to factor in. 2 things.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we can even structure this as a 6-month, so it's not too heavy of a lift, if that seems to be a more reasonable time frame.
Yeah, it just really, again, is going to depend on when we have what other events are going on. It's really kind of more dependent on what's coming out the pipeline and what happens to fall when, because we get a lot of requests from our members that want to do events. So it's just kind of really just dependent upon that. I can't, it's hard for me even to predict even a month to month and a half. Well, I can predict maybe 2 months out at most. 6 is kind of tricky just because I don't know what's coming up.
Right.
Right, but we can have informal meetings. Like when we're planning an event, like the event that I'm planning on the family planning thing, we've had 5 meetings that are just, sort of small planning meetings. So, but this is in terms of Paul's talking about sort of the official events that are, large and organized in a way like this. But if there's, informal conversations and things, those we have Stephanie and I meet on the side to just talk about planning and things like that.
So on that point, we are actually, because we know all of you want to connect in between events, obviously, right? And networking is really hard right now. It's not easy. One thing we are trying to do, and we're trying to pilot this with another work group when I have time to get around to looking at finalizing everything, is we're trying to revitalize our LinkedIn groups for the work groups. We used to have them. We phased them out 5 years ago because they, so some were active, some weren't. There was just varying degrees of level of activity. But we're trying to bring them back, and we just need to work out, basic guidelines and i.e. what is okay to post, what is not okay to post, those types of things. So once we've piloted it with another work group and we think it's fully functional, operational, and we can, launch it across all of our work groups. And that's hopefully something that we could bring back, and hopefully to Stephanie, Laura, to your point, we can kind of bring back all that, in between the conversation in between events. And we're not so beholden to having events all the time to actually talk to each other.
Great, thanks.
Yeah.
How many people are active in this working group, the health and nutrition specific one?
So we're working on creating systems to be able to track that information more. Our website's a little wonky, and we're working on that. There are, as of right now, I believe about 1,500 people on the 1,500 emails on the list, on the email list. Yeah. It's hard. I don't know how many of those are active, how many are versus aren't active. That's about the closest I can tell you right now, unfortunately, but it's something we're trying to work on.
Has there been ever any thought, Paul, on a distribution list?
That's kind of what the LinkedIn group is supposed to do. Essentially, it's supposed to kind of be that as well. So trying to be kind of a couple different things.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I feel like there's so many people, right? And so how do you kind of keep communication flowing for different reasons, either for just disseminating information or for exchange of information or networking? Or maybe we could send out the LinkedIn group, because I don't even think I have that, Paul. I'll look at that.
No, I'm saying we haven't done it yet.
Okay.
I haven't even done the pilot yet, so we need to do the pilot first to make sure it actually works. And it's what we think it should be. We just need to make sure we try it and make sure we've thought through everything, and then expand it across all the work groups. So we're still working on that. I need to tell all co-chairs about it, but we're still, most co-chairs I think know, but I want to make sure it's done the best to our ability before we actually start expanding it. outside
Right.
of just one.
No, makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah. Take some time.
But
So-
hopefully that's not too far on the horizon. That's like maybe within the next, I don't know, maybe next 3 to 6 months, hopefully earlier than that.
Well, let's keep the conversation going around COVID-19. I mean, I think there's some potential topics here that we just explored today. We can continue sort of talking it through in terms of how we want to frame those conversations. And then we probably want to reach out to the agriculture and food security working group. You know, that's another opportunity for collaboration in the future. So I think there's 2 items, and then, yeah, thinking through sort of networking as Paul sort of thinks through larger systems that could be helpful for larger networking.
And do we have your emails, Stephanie and Laura? I know that Paul shared his.
I can share mine. I'll put mine in the chat. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Make sure it's to everyone. There you go. Yeah. So I think Laura put hers in the chat. I put ours in the chat. So, well, thank you, everyone. We appreciate your time. And yeah, let's kind of keep the conversation going. And I'm excited to meet everyone. And again, you know, the door's open for any other topics or events that you feel we want to use this platform for. I think it's a really great opportunity to really sort of highlight sort of best practices and really share experiences across the membership.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Also, too, if you, my colleague Jamal posted a link to a survey in the chat. If you have a moment and can fill it out, that would be greatly appreciated. We do take your feedback very much so into consideration as we build out our future programming.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Thank you to the SID-W team as well.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank